where you lived, what life was like then.
That was late '43 when I went in the service. I was inducted in Old Fairmont, and then I had to think a 15-day before I went in to actually train, which was in Fort McCallum, Alabama. It was called Sing Sing, if you ever heard of Sing Sing. It was a rough camp, I'll tell you. It was an infantry camp. I was in the 29th Infantry Division. And we went overseas in Glasgow, Scotland, landed there and trained down to England. And they told us there in England, said you'd normally be here from 8 to 10 months, but unfortunately you would be leaving within 72 hours that time. So we loaded up after that across the English Channel in Omaha Beach, and on Omaha Beach. I don't know what wave. We went in just wave after wave after wave for not just days, just days. And I went in Omaha Beach and went to several towns up through there toward Paris. But I remember St. Lo. I can tell you something about St. Lo that it's like kind of like Glenville, coming down the Glenville Hill into a small town, you know. And never forget it. Even the trees, everything was shot, just mowed down like a machine gun mowed it down. And there was a church on the right, I remember that well, a church on the right. And that church had never got a shot. Never wasn't a bark shot off of that church. And I said to myself, it wasn't supposed to get a shot. So we went on through St. Lo and I don't know how many towns. Several towns, I can't even remember their names. And but it was a mess clear up through the fighting mess, and you would get. I was in there in England when I went in. In England, they wanted 10 guys that would want to stay together. They guaranteed to stay together. Well, there was 10 of us that volunteered, was in demolition squad. Well, I didn't know what I was getting into. Of course, they didn't either. But we ended up in the demolition squad, and each one of us carried a 50-pound TNT on your shoulder, for that was to blow up hedgerows or pillboxes or whatever. They called them hinge poles. It was about probably, the poles were 8 foot long, and saying they were called ball socket on a ball socket. For any way you'd set that, you just have to get a bit of stick down, and it would set right there, and it would blow up whatever you was supposed to blow up. And we were actually fire growers, you know, draw snipers, because I can remember one bottom that we train that we went through over there that a shot passed my head just like shooting through a paper. That's how close it was. And I run. Well, I talk about people running. I didn't run, I flew. And I jumped a hedgerow, and this is the truth if I never lived to get off this cart. I jumped a hedgerow, and when I got on the other side of the hedgerow, I stopped and looked back, and I said, how in the world did I ever get? I couldn't crawl over it. How I jumped that thing, but God gave me strength, and I beat it. I was scared now, believe me, I was scared. In fact, there wasn't a time that I wasn't scared. And for a long time, the ground shook under me, I thought, but probably me shaking on the ground, I don't know, but scared, I was scared all the way. And you got a lot of hatred in you as you went along. I seen the time over there that I'd slap my own mother, which I wouldn't do for nothing in the world. But that's the way you get, you know, terrible. And I remember there in Brest, France, that's where I got hit later. But we went on into Brest, France, all the way clear into Brest, France, and they declared it an open city and wouldn't let us fire on it. So they loaded us up and brought us back to Brest, France. And Brest, France, it was the greatest submarine pen there was in the whole European theater operation. One that we had hemmed in as we went in, you know, kept them in. And we bombed it. They bombed it, and the bomb went over like water on a duck's back. I remember that. And the British invented what they called the British blockbuster. And now at that time I was in the hospital though. I was hit at Brest, France. At that time when the British blockbuster was invented, hit that pen, submarine pen, it went through it, it penetrated it. But at that time I got hit there, Brest, France. And that was September the 8th. I remember that because there's only about 6 or 8 of us left, and we were lay down a broads of fire where we could, and there'd be another company move up in front of us, another hedgerow out. And there's where I got hit, 88 shrapnel. And Brest, France. And I was back to what they call the field hospital, and well, there's a fellow with me in a foxhole there at Brest, France we had, and you know, if you fall facing one another in the foxhole, you fall in that. Then this Rittenhouse boy, I remember the Rittenhouse boy, he fell in there, we fell in there, and when that hit that 88 shrapnel, 88 shell hit that hedgerow, it exploded, just shrapnel went every place. And of course it blew his head off. I'd seen that go. And of course I'd have fallen that way and he'd have fallen this way. And therefore the medics picked me up and carried me out the hood of a Jeep and taken me to field hospital, and they operated on me there. And then I spent that rest of that night there. And then next morning they flew me to Taunton, England, at the General Hospital, 101st General Hospital, Taunton, England. And I was, the doctor there, as soon as they took me in there, he began to cut the bandages off of me, and I remember told the nurse, give him a shot and call the surgeons to come up and immediately and get him. Well, she came, or the medics came and got me. And there was a little red-headed girl, I'll never forget that. She said, will you do something for me, if you will? I said, yeah, well, 10. She said, count to 10. She was going to give me a shot, you know. I might have got to 3, but that was the end of it. I went out. Well, I had gangrene in my leg then due to the fact that, I don't know, but I presume they didn't get it cleaned up right, you know, or fixed up right to field hospital. I don't know, but it was I was there in the hospital for, well, I was there for about 9 months. There in, well, 10, maybe close to 10 months there in the hospital in Taunton, England. I do remember I don't remember the doctor's name, but I do remember the nurse's name. One was, let's see, one was Lieutenant K, and she was my nurse, and what was the other's name? I'll think of it here in a minute, maybe. Hellberry. Lieutenant Hellberry. She was from Battle Creek, Michigan, I know that. And to top it off, she was the same age I was, and she was, her birthday February 11th. I'll never forget that. And she was a wonderful, wonderful person. And I'd spent and they took care of me, I'll tell you that, the nurses and the doctors, excuse me.
Go ahead and turn that off.
And the doctors and the nurses was wonderful. And I can tell you, in the field hospital, those nurses and doctors in there was so busy that I could see that nurse looked like he'd have to pry her eyes open when she gave me anesthetic there. See, they were so busy there. And never forget that. And the field hospital was a big tent all the while. They laid you on the ground, and when they took you, they could come get you, you know, come get you and take you in there and operate on you, and then move you in another portion of the tent, and you sat there, you laid there the rest of that night. The next day when they took me to Taunton, England, flew me out there, and I can never mind when we were flying back. Of course, there was 27 of us litter patients, and when that thing took off going through the air, all at once it just felt like it fell out from under, you know. You know what happened? The nurse fell to her feet in the aisle, and I said, well, what in the world happened? And she said, hit an air pocket. Well, I did hear the motors rev up, you know, but I don't know how far we fell. Of course, they did, but I didn't know, and they never told me. But then all at once it took off, leveled off a bit. And when we landed there in England, I didn't even know, when they landed, never felt nothing, and didn't know nothing until they slid the door open. When they slid the door, when they took me into the hospital. Of course, several hospitals there in England, I'm sure different ones. But I was in there for, I'll say, about 9 or 10 months. And I had about 7 operations there when I was there. One of them was a skin graft. And a German prisoner made my first long leg brace. A German prisoner. I remember that. And they shot my whole leg off there, and it was so far apart that they used German stainless steel wire, twisted up like twisting wire bars, you know. You tore the hide like that. I suppose my hide's any thicker than a cigarette paper there. They just kept pulling it shut that time. Finally, they took again skin graft off of this one and finished it up. Of course, it ended up pretty good shape. And I'll never forget when I left there. I was to come by a plane for 2 times that I know of. They said you were leaving tomorrow, but during to the boards they had a fight up there, and they had to have all the planes for gasoline, so they said. But the doctor come in, and he was a major, what he was. He come in, he said, now tomorrow you're going to go by boat. And I remember when the ambulance come and got me, they had an ambulance, 4 patients to the ambulance, litter patients, you know, hung them up in the side. And I remember there was about 8 or 10 inches of snow there in England. Of course, they said the Buddy Yanks was the cause of that. They called us, the Buddy Yanks, they called us, you know, for said people was 70, 80 years old, never seen snow there in Taunton, England, in the southern part of England. Never seen snow till that day. So they said. I don't know. I know I seen snow. Hadn't seen any prior to that, but that's what they told me. But anyway, they took us out, and I don't know how far we was from the port, as far as that concerned, but I know they loaded us in there, and I never forget this also. They come around and want to know what we wanted to eat, you know, for supper. And this was a no-no. Never heard this asked before. But whatever you want, they tell you, they say, whatever you want, you can have. Well, of course, I ordered up steak, mashed potatoes. They name over a lot of stuff for you. Mashed potatoes, I never forget. Green beans, and had dessert, I don't remember what, and all that. But we landed in Boston, Massachusetts, that's where we come to first. And when we landed there, it was on my birthday, February the 11th. I'll never forget it. And there was a big snow there. The snow was so bad the trains couldn't even run. That's how bad it was. And so the Red Cross gave us a 3-minute phone call home. Well, I called my mother's, and my wife stayed there with my mother, and I called home, and I couldn't even, when she answered, and I remember her saying, well, where are you at? I couldn't answer, just for a jiffy. She said, are you on this side of the water? And I said, yes. You know, I did get that out, but I couldn't talk, and the throat caught in my throat. Then finally, she hollered for my wife, and I could hear her. She said, Clyde's on the phone, and she said, bomb your line, just like that. I never forget it now. So she come to the phone, and of course she wanted to come see me right now, but we were told that we wouldn't be there in about 48 hours. We'd be shipped out of there. And so I told her, I said, you can't come here to visit, but when we get to a new destination, then I will call you. And she said, all right. So it was about 3 or 4 days longer really than we're supposed to have been there due to the fact that the snow. They had to run, they said, snow plow or something on the train and get it up the road for 57 years. Of course, it took the stuff out, I couldn't stand up on it, you know, it just down that way. So when it healed up in here, he said that it mashed that main leader shut and wouldn't let it circulate, and got gangrene in it, and had to take it off. And he couldn't find that till after it was too late. But that leg hurt me, you wouldn't have no idea. But he didn't find it. But that's what's been doing it all the time. But I have phantom pain now that you wouldn't believe.
Now?
Phantom pain. Do you ever hear of them?
That means it's not there.
Well, I'll tell you, you know,
the pain from...
Phantom pain is something that your toes will hurt, your foot will hurt, bottom of your foot, your ankle will hurt.
And it's not
but
there.
But you don't have any.
Right.
It's up here. But they say, I taken pills, 6 pills a day for that, till just about a month or 6 weeks ago, I started cutting down and I quit, you know, because they said I don't think they're doing you any good anymore. Whether you got immune to it or whatever, I don't know the deal. But he also told me that it'll move over into this leg too, or this leg into this leg. I didn't know that. Now the doctor told me that now, and I said, oh, I can't believe that, you know, I couldn't believe the phantom pain. They call them phantom pain.
Is that all?
You ever hear of them? Now some people, when they have their legs off, when they take them off, and he said this, he said sometimes it was not as bad others as they are maybe others, you know, they just, some's worse than others, I'll put it that way, that's what he said, he explained it. But he says they will finally leave. Well, I wish it'd leave pretty soon because, and I've had this one off now for, well, about 1.5 years, or a little over, and this year was taken off, it was taken off about a year ago. And this is about 1.5 years, this was taken off first. But a fellow by the name of Patnack up there at Alton General Hospital in Canton, and an awful nice fellow. Best, in fact, as good a doctor as I'd ever seen in my life, as far as I'm concerned. And he was a good believer too. he believed in the Lord. And I will have to, I do know definitely that the Lord was with me, or I wouldn't have been here today. I know that. Something will tell you that too. When I went overseas, I'll never forget. And when I passed the Statue of Liberty, I went from Kilmore, New Jersey, into when I went overseas. And when I passed Statue of Liberty, something told me, just don't worry, you'll be back. But he didn't say you're going to get hurt or go, not, but don't worry, you'll be back. And I could just see like my hair stood straight up. Now that gives you a lot of help, you know, when you're going into battle. And I had no idea what it was like. That's about like going into a job, as far as that's concerned, until you get to the real thing. And then when it hits you right now. And people was never scared. I've had people say it didn't bother me in the Army. Well, I can say one thing: they wasn't in the front lines, or there's something wrong with them. It was never scared, because that will scare you. I'll tell you, I have seen things that unbelievable, unbelievable. In fact, there at West France, where I got hit prior, that there was a church there. Oh, I don't remember how far it was, but we could hear them hollering and squalling, but we couldn't get to them, you know. So the enemy at that time, and they set that thing far and brought them up in there. Old women, old men, children, you know, it wasn't no good to them. No, they actually done that. And I do know that they had punched them people's eyes out. I do know they'd pull their tongue out and whack it off with a bayonet. I know that to happen. I couldn't believe it myself, and I wouldn't believe it today if someone told me, and if I hadn't seen it. That's the truth. But I will say that, I'll get ahead of my story, or behind my story, but I went from there to Camp Pickett, Virginia General Hospital, and I was there probably for a couple, 3 weeks, and the doctor said to me, he said, would you like to go home for 30 days? I said, yes, sir, and my wife at that time had come to and we come back together home up there, and I stayed for 30 days, and my mother cooked for me, which my wife stayed there. My mother cooked for me, and I was home 30 days, and I gained 30 pounds a week. And in fact, I think when I was out of the Army, come out of England there, I weighed about 25 pounds. When I went in the service, I weighed about 210, 220, something like that, when I went in the service. But when I come out, I was pretty well undernourished at that time. And I remember the doctor there in England told me, this was about 5 or 6 weeks after I was operated on there. He said, Cumberledge, he always called me Cumberledge. He said, Cumberledge, I want to tell you, the next time you're that near dead, you're going to be dead. I'll never forget that. But I guess I was pretty bad. And I would have to say the doctors and the nurses was wonderful for me. All the time I was in the hospital, I was always in a private room. They kept me in a private room, and it was close to the nurses' station, just across the hall from the nurses' stations, till they discharged me there in Virginia, Camp Pickett, Virginia. And they discharged me there. I don't even remember what day it was. I was so happy to get home, you know, at that time. I was wanting to get home, And, there's a miller drove, I can't even think of first name, but I had worked with him prior. He drove truck. Finally, he went to work for Greyhound. He was driving Greyhound bus then. And his run was from Clarksburg to Charleston. And I had come home, and you know, after I gained that 30 pounds, went back to Camp Vick, Virginia, and I gained 30 pounds, and the doc said, well, must have done you good to go home. I said, it did, sir. He said, would you like to go home for another 15 days? And I said, I sure would. He said, don't unpack your bags. So I went back. I got back on, they took me down to Blackstone, Virginia. I got on the bus there and come back in, and I remember Roy Welton's come up the street, and my wife would work in the store down there, and I had told the bus driver, I said, Miller, I said, you let me off here, that's where the super service was down at the end of the bridge. I'll go down the alley. I was on crutches, and I'll come up there and slip in on them. So when she seen there in the store, said, I just seen Clyde. Said, no, you didn't. He said, he had to go back a couple of days ago. He said, I just seen him coming up the alley walking. He said, no, you're mistaken. He said, now I know I seen him. Well, of course, she didn't believe him, you know. And as I was getting up the steps, on the crutches there, and the next step, I remember she come and looked, you know. And about halfway up the steps I was when she caught me coming up. But my mother didn't know I was coming back either. Or she didn't either. She was back with me that time. But that's what happened. And I was on crutches for, I was on crutches for a long time because they put the brace on me, and when they turned me off the table and stood me down, it felt like it was an old German-made brace, and it felt like pulled my hip out of socket. And I told the doc, I said, boy, I can't walk on that thing. He said, you will. He said, use your crutches so you get used to it. And that's what I did. I used the crutches for, I don't know how long I used the crutches are. I had no idea, but I don't remember. But I used crutches. Finally got the cane, used the cane. And then I got so I could get along pretty good with the braces. I wore that thing for 57 years, and Lead Orthopedic made my braces. At that time, it was in Huntington. I was reporting to Huntington. And they, Lead Orthopedic, I think, was in Beckley at that time, or probably some other places too. And the guy there measured my leg and this and that, and they'd make that brace and send it to me. And I never did have one that worked good, fit good on me. Now this last fell here a couple of years ago, they made that one, and they had to change it. The government changed the rule, but they had just one latch on the right side, you know, to stiffen it out. But they said you got to have both sides. Well, they put a swar around there so you can trip that thing. Then they made this in here for me. The first one they made, that was this last time, a year ago, they made one that didn't fit, didn't work. They sent it back, or made it Akron. I didn't know but what they were made there, but all he did that was fit them, you know, measure and fit them and send it to Akron, made that. So this one didn't fit, the last one didn't. So they made another one. And then I had to go back and have some terrible adjustments on that. And to my opinion, I ain't no race person, but to my opinion, it's still not right. And my therapist could tell you, well, she wouldn't tell you. In fact, when I went back up there, one time I know up there, and she wrote a little note to them, what, you know, she hoped that they could get a try to walk further with it. But I don't know. I'll tell you, they're not like your limbs are to start with. But you can walk on them. I walk onto the house with a walker, but they don't want you to, the folks don't want you to walk unless there's somebody you know around. But I put them on. I put them on every day. And in fact, I just took them off here. It hadn't been 10 minutes when we first got on those folks. Because they hurt my legs sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to take them off.
Yeah, you should probably go back again. Let them. You should probably go back again. Let them get it straightened out for you.
Yeah. Well, I went back up there. I'll tell you. In fact, I told him. I said, well,
someone had to do it.
there's no
Go ahead.
what your problem is, but
We made it go.
I said I
You
got
got turned off.
And I say, by the grace of God, I'm here today. I definitely know that, and definitely know that. And the surgery that I had there in Alton Hospital in Canton, he was a believer, believe me, because I have asked him at his office when I went back for a checkup. I'd asked him something, and he said he was up that time. And I'll tell you, and I know definitely, your neighbors, your people could do all they can do for you, but one could cover the Lord. I lost my wife. She's 49 years old, cancer, and people done everything for me, and my neighbors, her family, and my own family, but the one could comfort me is the Lord. And He the one also brought me back from overseas. And there's a lot of them back in worse shape than I am. I definitely know that. There was 2 GIs that I know of, that lost all their limbs. And one of them was in the hospital in Taunton where I was. And I remember the doctor said, well, we'll put limbs on you and have you walk and use your arms and legs. Well, back at that damn time, you know, I had laughed to myself. It never happened, you know, but it did happen. Because they make all the limbs for you, all different. But it's not like you're normal, I'll tell you that. Because I've had to wear a bracelet for all night, so I know. But the grace of God that's brought me back. I'm a great believer in that. I'll always be. I hope I never lose that.
Did you and your wife have children?
Yes, 2 boys. I have George, is the oldest boy. He was in Vietnam when he got the Bronze Star. And the other boy, David, he lives in the High now, up East Canton, Lucille, which is right there together, like Northville and Glenville, you know. And he's up there, and there. See, I was up there at the VA hospital when I got sick. And David came down, and George, my oldest boy, had an open heart surgery just before I got sick. Well, I went to Charleston every day to see him, and then I got down myself. Didn't know what was wrong with me, but I went to the VA, and of course they done the VA. If you ever dealt with the VA, if you ever deal with the VA, right? You know, you go and they check you, you come back and they check you. But I will have to say, the VA has been wonderful to me. I'll have to say that helped me a lot. I'm sure of that. It's like everything else, like my leg, this leg where they missed that, there I could have saved that leg had they found that before. So the surgeon told me. That's what caused that. But sometimes you don't find this till too late. But I got this, and I got the left of my hip. I got the left of my hip took off as big as your hand. And my family doctor, Dr. Steinifer down here, he's dead now, been gone dead for years. It took 7 pieces of shrapnel out of my hip when I was discharged, or 2 years after I was discharged. And now I have got shrapnel in my hip now. You can feel yourself. It
worked its way out.
Worked its way out. You know, this is another thing that puzzled me. How come I've been x-rayed umpteen times, but they never found that. But the only thing I could think myself, or they do, or the other, if they tried to operate on it, hit a nerve and paralyze you, breaks down or whatever. That's the only way that I know of it. They missed it. But I know Doc Steiner. I'll never forget. His wife was a nurse. And I went up to Doc Steiner and I told him my hip was hurting me there. So he met me down over the table and looked at my hip, and he said, I'm going to put some stuff on it. You come back up tomorrow and we'll see what it is. He put that old axle grease I call black axle. Used to put it on borals, you know, years ago. So he put that on there and bandaged it up. And the next evening I went back up and bent over the table, and Miss Steiner held my head in a towel. And he reached up. That was festered. It come out easy, but some of it was calloused, you know. And he'd take them tweezers and pull it out, and it hurt. Oh my, you know, it done hurt. And I never forget what he said. And I flinched, of course, when he was pulling loose. It hurt. He said, "What's wrong, Clyde? Is it hurting you?" I said, "Doctor, it killed me." He said, "Well, it's not bothering me a bit." And his wife said, "Why, doctor, he ought to kill you." I never forget that. And it did hurt, I can tell you that. And you know, when I noticed this again in my hip was, it's been about 10 years ago. My dad, well, it's been longer than that. My dad was passed away, and I was going to go see about it then, you know, what was wrong with my hip. But I had other things to think about at that time, so I didn't do it. And after he passed away, I felt of that my hip there, and I could feel that shrapnel in there. And here's when I down to VA, probably 6 or 8 months ago, for maybe been a little longer or a little less, maybe. And there was a doctor examined me down there, and I said, "You feel right here." I was up on the table. George picked me up after the oldest boy picked me up and put me on the table, and she examined it, and she could feel it. But shrapnel, you can feel it yet today. And then this arm, I lost the use of this arm for approximately 2 months. I couldn't use it. It turned it to twist it out. When I come back, the doctor told me I come up at the hospital out in Taunton, England, told me to move my hand. I couldn't do it. And he just wouldn't move. See it? Maybe can you see it there?
Yeah.
Well, he said like the thickness of a cigarette paper cut that nerve clear in two, and never would have been able to use it. But they used heat treatments on them. I remember used heat treatments and massage and this, and probably 2 or 3 months I could move my fingers. I couldn't prior, I couldn't use them, couldn't twist the angle or nothing. But after I got to doing that, of course, I spent like 11 days. I've been a year in the hospital. Nothing that I could say, but Lord, I forgot of it, and a lot of it I want to forget. You know, I couldn't talk about it for years. I did. And I will have to say one thing, when I come back home, I wasn't fit to be in public because I was irritable, I was mad at myself, mad at the world, mad at everybody else. That's drove into them. It drove into when you were in the service there, I'll tell you, it's unbelievable what actually happened to you. I know people today, it's one thing, you know, they go out of their head, well, I go out of their head, I go out of my head more than ever was, but the thing I mean, they just went through such turmoil that it's just unbelievable. And how they even keep a half a right mind. And I know definitely, it's the truth, if it wasn't for the good Lord has helped me all the way for that. And I know that. In fact, I had this, when I said I wasn't fit to be in public, and I have went down to my church, I belong down to Baptist church, and I went to Baptist church, and I prayed for him to take that terrible out of me because I wasn't fit to be in public. That's the truth. Just any little thing just far me off, But, and the good Lord did. And wasn't Clyde done it, someone else had to do it. And I don't know who someone else was. It's something that I can't explain, but I'll guarantee you will know it within yourself. And I've been that way for many, many years. I'm a sinner. I know I'm a sinner. I definitely am a sinner. But the thing that I should have done, I did do, and the thing I should have done, I didn't do, But,
how old are you now, Clyde?
I'm on 82. I'm going 82. I'm going 82 now. 81. I'm 81. I'm going 82 now.
Where were you when Pearl Harbor was bombed?
Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Well, I was in Glendale. I was home at that time. In the early part of the hour. Let's see. I'm positive it was. I know it was. Of course, Pearl Harbor. I don't remember. Just I didn't know. I did know, but I forgot. But I think I was at home yet. Hadn't went into service yet at that time. I don't think. It might have.
Did you think we were going to get involved in the war?
No, really. You never do that. Or I never thought. But I said when I went, absolutely, when I went overseas on a ship over the English Channel, and we went, I just felt like going into a job, going to be off a job, but it's an altogether a different thing. Once you get there, you don't know what it's like. But when I went in Omaha Beach, and I can say that was a sandy pillboxes up around there, pillboxes there, and I can remember ships shot down. You could see the flagpole sometimes sticking out of the water, and some maybe the end of it. And when we went in there with MLST, you could hardly had trouble getting in there to the beach. In fact, you waded water probably up to your knee, up to your waist, I mean. And when the end falls out of MLSTs, they're full of people. Hundreds of them hit that beach. And when the end falls out of it, you go, because that guy driving that LST, he'll get out there as soon as he can, because somebody shooting him or whatever. And there was hundreds of people, and ships, just thick of them. I tell you, it's unbelievable, I'll tell you that. Unbelievable.
Did you have to go to a special school?
Huh?
Did you have to go to a special school?
No.
Did what kind of
training? I went that training in 17 weeks in Fort McCallum, Alabama. I was in there in the Sing Sing, they called it.
Yeah.
Sing Sing, Alabama.
Now, what kind of did you have a rifle before you went?
No, I never did care for a gun, but I went out on the rifle range, and the first time I was shot the M1, semi-automatic they were, and shot the target 300 yards. The target is baggage orders they call them. It's probably a 4 or 5 foot square, and they have circles around it, and it's colored. And when you fire that range, you fire into that circle. Then the people that run to them will call that back where you were good or not. But I remember the first time I shot mine, rifle M1, just give you one shell. I shot that shell. I never forget the instructor, sergeant instructor. And when I shot it, I bet I didn't shoot 10 feet after it hit the ground. And I said, he said to me, he said, what happened, Cumberledger? I said, something wrong with the gun, you know, I'll never forget it long. And he took that just like a pistol. Now, the M1, they're heavy, you know. And that M1 just took it like a pistol shot, and he hit the target. Just plumb zero. He said, there ain't nothing wrong with the gun. I said, it's you. Well, I was flinching, you know, scared, nervous. I wasn't a foreign man to start with. I had no plus 22, you know. But this is another thing that I just come to that I remember when we were on the fire run. We shot hand grenades off them one with a blank shell. They were well, you destroy tanks or something with, and they would put a building up, and you shoot those over into that tank, and you did it with shoot. I never forget what they call it. But anyway, Mike, I'll never forget it. A fellow called Mike, and he was 17 years old, right behind me. And he said, Cumberledger, does them kick? I said, no, Mike, they won't kick you. But they never did have him. A helmet liner would fit him. That helmet liner just go around that way. I'll never forget that long as I live. And when he fired that, I can see him yet. Now, this is the God's truth. That helmet just stood there, and he went around, and he come back crying to me. He said, because he went up, you know. And I said, Mike, you didn't. He said, Cumberledger, you said you lied to me. I said, no, I didn't lie to you, Mike. I said, you just failed to hold it right. Well, that about broke my shoulder, I thought. But he was a little boy, but he told me the reason he was in the Army, they give him the choice, either reform school or go to the Army. Now, he told me that. I never forget. He was pigeon-toed. I'm telling you, he was a pigeon-toed fellow ever I seen. When we was doing training down there, and Cal Staff was it. I remember he carrying his gun, you know, his pigeon-toed so bad, he's shooting that way. And I said, Mike, he was over from me. I said, you throw them shells out of there, because if you see somebody doing that, you know, because they were sitting like automatic, and he did, and he threw them out of there. You shoot targets, you know, you do that down there. Well, if they can pop up in front of you, you know, they would, then you were supposed to shoot them. So he threw the shells out. He never shot them. But he could have shot somebody, I'll tell you that. I never seen him after we left Fort McCallum, Alabama. I never seen him after that. But I remember it was in Cross, Cecil Cross. I remember him. And a fellow named Devaney from Pennsylvania. I don't know what Cross was from. I don't remember. But they were killed. They didn't. Well, Cross, I don't suppose he lasted 5 minutes. He did that. He was gone. And Devaney's wife, and my wife, when we was in bases up in Fort McCallum, Alabama, they'd visit one another. And they stayed there at the same place together. And Devaney and I were good friends. And they visit. We'd go to Anniston, Alabama, when we get off, you know, we get a pass, go down to Anniston, Alabama. And of course we ate a lot, and they visited while we were on training. I remember one time, old Corporal Lecco, I remember him, he was a sailor, and Corporal said, is that your wife? I said, yeah. And we were supposed to have a night party that night. And I said, well, I was supposed to be there for tonight, but we'll have a night party. He said, I'll take care of it. I'll never forget it. He said, you go down to the supply house and report down there. You don't go on the big wax tonight. I said, all right. He said, he'll let you go so the company moves out, you know. So the company moved out, and And this supply sergeant there said, you can leave now, they're going. And I took off running as hard as I could go over what they call a PX, you know, service club or where I was supposed to be. I don't know where I met that. But Corporal Echo was, another thing about old Corporal Echo, we was on a 25 or 26 mile height, and they were, people dropped full field equipment there in Alabama when it was taking place. And Corporal Echo was right along beside me, which I chewed tobacco. I've chewed tobacco ever since I was 4 years old. And of course, as I walked down, I had chill in my mouth too at that time. And Corporal Echo said, you got any more of that tobacco? I said, yeah, of course that was, I wasn't supposed to chew it, you know. And he reached in, I said, there in my hip pocket. He reached in my pocket and got a chew up and put it in his mouth. What would have happened, you're just getting so dry, you know, your lips stuck together. Mm-hmm. But when I had that tobacco in there, it didn't, you know, just kept it moist. And I said, Lecco, did you ever chew before? He said, nope. I'll never forget that. But, and I don't know, he took my chew my mail pouch at that time.
He turned green.
I remember about probably, well, we could see it. One might have been 1,000 feet, but the sergeant give us double time. What was left, a lot of them fell out. They'd pick them up in the trucks and haul them back to Spencer. So he give us double time. I'll never forget it. And they had water. We'd walk 26 miles, and we had they give you a salt pill. One can of water, all you get. If you see them camps, I'm sure they cost, and canteen, and they'd put a salt pill in that too. And it wasn't very good drinking, I can tell you that. But that would bring the sweat out on you, make you sweat. That's salt water would. But then they had bags of water there when we got out there. And I remember they must have been, well, they probably was 30 or 40 people dropped out and dropped over there, and they picked them up. But what was left, they gave us double time just before we got to the bivouacs, I called it. Before we got there, they gave us double time, and we run out there because we knew we was going to get a drink. And it wasn't salt water. They didn't put no pill in it. But I've had some, and I say I've had some awful close. I had a piece of shrapnel one time that hit me in my helmet. You could have laid an egg in it and cut it down. You got a camouflage on that helmet, and you could have laid an egg in that thing. Now it's how far it knocked it. It's a good thing I had the helmet on. It took my head off, I heard it. But my head rung like it had hit a sledgehammer. How long, I don't remember, but they had a shell, the Germans had them, they could set those things and they could explode maybe a foot off of the ground and then just go that way. They just cut roads. Right. It was what they call overhead artillery burst, what they called it. And it was something that you couldn't get away from it, hardly. The only way you get it if you're down in the hole, you know, You know, the first time, and it's another thing that I remember too, you don't reluctance to dig a hole, you know. You don't want to do any extra work. After the first shell, you'll work. You'll dig a hole. Nobody have to tell you to dig a hole either. But I have dug a hole first. If I'd only stopped, maybe move out we'd move up maybe only dig it maybe get the hole halfway done, and then move up, and then you dig another hole. And you'll dig another one too. And I remember one night in there, of course this is terrible, I don't know how tired I was, but it come a rain, I remember that. And I was in that foxhole, and what woke me up, water came around, I just about got my fur. The rest of it was covered with water. But that woke me up when I got in here, and I come out of that hole full of water. We had an awful lot of rain over there. And my feet was there at the hospital when England, when they took my socks, my shoes, I thought the sock was rotten, as far as that concerned, and took my socks off, and they wrapped my feet in towels, and the hide just come off. They did that 2 or 3 times a day when they was in the hospital. Well, that's what they told me. I know my feet was wrapped the first time I seen them. But I didn't hardly know anything. Well, I don't remember nothing anyhow. But I think 12, 14 days before I really knew anything. And when I did, I asked the nurse, there it was with me. I said, would you write a letter home to my wife? I gave her. She said, yes, you can tell me what to write. And she wrote that letter and home, and Mom got the telegram from the War Department that morning out of the post office, and she got my letter, she said, in the evening. And so, I just told her it was all right, you know, but the War Department had sent her a telegram. He was in 101st General Hospital, Taunton, England, that seriously conditioned, and that's always told, you know, in the War Department. But I had that. I told her that just tell her I was all right where I was, but I was propped every way in the bed. I remember that. They propped me one thing and the other.
Okay, we're out of tape.
Pardon?
We're out of the tape.
Well,
You run out of breath anyway, didn't you?
Yeah, I can say a lot of things I wouldn't want to say.
Yeah.
But now, I'll tell you what. You couldn't believe it if you hadn't seen it. If people would tell me, I wouldn't believe it, I'll tell you that. And it's hell. The GIs it's over there, which is hundreds of thousands of them never made it back.
Oh, yeah.
Killed by a fly. And I can tell you right, you ain't got me on, have you?
No.
Well, recording?
I'm still
No,
on. It's still on, it's just flashing. It's down to 4 minutes now.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well,
Just go ahead.
yeah, I just want to say that. I remember there on the beach there was bodies, there was bodies every place. You can't imagine. Any war is bad, but of course, I believe World War II, of what I know of them, was a terrible, it's unbelievable. You couldn't believe it. But they're all, you can't believe them. But it's a lot different now than it used to be. Now, when I was in there, you couldn't, if you went on a furlough or something, you had to come out in full dress uniform, or the MPs would put you back in stockade. That's what happened to you. Well, now, it had been my boy when he was in Vietnam, he'd come home in a suit. It didn't bother him. And they didn't stop him or nothing. You wear your suit or take your fatigues off, whatever, but it don't bother you. But when I was there, if you didn't have your tie on right, or your shoes laced up, you were gigged, what they call gig, you know, that time. And you'd go back to the stockade. The MPs would take you. I knew a boy one time, well, I remember the first Zug suit. Have you ever heard of that? Zug suit? Well, there was a colored boy there, and where I was out in Taunton, England, had cut a Zug suit. Now, he was with the outfit there, and he cut that mate, and he started out with that thing, and the MPs picked him up, you know, at the gate as he was going out or wherever. I don't remember, I was in the hospital that time, but I remember they picked him up and took him back in. Well, there's where he's supposed to be, so they told me now, this is something they told, that he was supposed to be the one, he was the one that invented that Zug suit, they called it.
Oh, yeah, with the big giant lapels, yeah.
He had the tail of it around this way. And you know, they court-martialed him. They court-martialed him because what he's doing is destroying government property. That's what they got him on. But then later on, they got to wearing them. The officers did. They got different suits. Yeah. And I remember a boy up there in Washington. We come into Washington there, and that boy, he had left his tie off or something, stuck it in his pocket, and rode the bus from Birmingham, Alabama. MP picked him up and took him back, took him back there. But they were strict, awful strict back then.
So you were in Walter Reed?
Huh?
Walter Reed? Walter Reed.
Bali.
Walter Reed Hospital.
I don't know.
Walter Reed?
Oh yeah, Walter Reed, yeah. Yeah, hospital, yeah, I know where that is. Yeah. There's a lot of them there too. A lot of
1 minute left.
1 minute. Well,
what would you say to younger people today?
well, I hope that they never have to go fight, but that is something we have to do for our freedom. The Bible says that there will be wars and numbers of wars, and this is something that's happened, but I'm not, I hate the war that we just had in Iraq. At first I was against it, at first, but I was talked to a general, I didn't talk to, a general that come on the news and said, if we hadn't went there, within 10 years there'd be a fighting right here on our own streets. Now I don't know if that's true or not, but that's a deal up in Washington, and I don't know where they killed about 30-some thousand, I know up there, and that I didn't know, but I forget, I'm not that up on it, but it killed a bunch of people there, and terrorist deal, and of course that's supposed to be part of Iraq and other countries over, but I don't know, a lot of this stuff, you know, you sometimes you think they just tell you what they want you to know, and you get disturbed about it. But I will say, the good Lord will take care of us all when the time comes. And vengeance is mine, he says, and that you can bet on. What he says,